Today marks the 20th anniversary of the deadly al-Qaeda bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania.
We say clearly and loudly that although we have suffered, we are not beaten. We will never let those who traffic death and destruction defeat us.
The strikes killed more than 250 people and injured around 5,000. They were the first al-Qaeda attacks on U.S. targets. President Trump's national security advisor warns Iran to stop supporting international terrorism. John Bolton says newly imposed U.S. sanctions are just the beginning.
We're working with all countries to reduce oil imports from Iran to zero. We're making progress on that. We think these sanctions are biting already, and we think they will continue to bite and cause significant negative economic consequences for Iran.
Bolton also calls on Iran to end its military activity in the Middle East and stop its ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs. President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal in May, fulfilling a campaign promise. Joining me now is Blaise Misztal, Director of National Security at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Blaise, welcome back to the program.
Blessed to be here.
Iran's president says he's ready to talk. Just 1 week ago, we heard President Trump say he's willing to meet with Iran's leadership without preconditions. Are we likely to see these two countries get to the bargaining table?
Well, if the last year is any precedent, after meetings with the leaders of North Korea and Russia, it seems that this is very possible. But it's also important to note that this is part of the strategy that President Trump has had. Unlike other deals that he's pulled out of, the climate change deal, past trade deals, it's not enough for him to pull out of this. Not having a deal is as bad as having the last deal. So he needs a new deal to constrain Iran's nuclear program. He needs them to stop their nuclear activities. He wants them to stop engaging and killing civilians in Syria and supporting terrorism. And he's going to have to negotiate that. So I think the idea here is let these sanctions take effect, let Iran feel the pressure, and then bring them to the negotiating table.
In a global economy, are U.S. sanctions alone likely to result in meaningful economic pressure?
Not U.S. sanctions on Iran alone, but what's important is the step that comes next, which is the threat of the U.S. sanctioning anyone who doesn't abide by those sanctions. And so what we've already seen is President Trump and his advisors sending very strong signals to Europe. If your businesses continue doing business with Iran, we will go after you. And that's what's having an effect. Mercedes-Benz has said they're going to pull out of a deal in Iran. We've seen the German bank said we're going to stop a transfer of $400 million to Iran just today. And that threat of U.S. sanctions against Europe is very serious, and that's what's going to have an effect.
Well, how will these sanctions impact our relationship with our allies?
So that is the big question mark here. We have had these sort of sanctions in the past. It's how we got the last deal, but it was always step by step going together with our allies in agreement. This is more, we're not just trying to coerce Iran into agreeing with us, we're trying to coerce the Europeans and our allies to go along with us.
Who still have a nuclear agreement with Iran.
Yes, who are still trying to make the last deal work, and who have plenty of other reasons they're dissatisfied with this administration, including tariffs and other trade issues. And that is the question here is how much pressure can you put on those relationships before something gives? And there is very real danger that maybe there's going to be too much. Maybe the Europeans are going to try to undermine U.S. sanctions, and that would be a problem.
We have seen the president's unconventional diplomatic strategy work in getting these face-to-face meetings, as you said before, with North Korea and with Putin in Russia. Are we likely to see a meeting before additional sanctions in Iran's oil sector and central bank are reinstated in November?
I doubt it, if only because when President Trump goes to the table with Iran, I think he wants to have the maximum leverage. And between new sanctions coming on in the next couple of months and the pressure that the Iranian government is under with protests happening across the country daily, waiting a couple months, letting that pressure sink in, I think is going to give him the upper hand when they do actually go to negotiate.
Blaise Misztal, Director of National Security at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.